Hello, everybody, and welcome to UFO Secret Space, and I'm your host, Janet Listen. And today, my special guest is Jean Ann Eisenhower. And Jean Ann is a multidimensional being like us all, but whose early form was hijacked at birth into the mind control operations of the U.S. government. She partially broke her programming, angering her controllers, who then put her into the targeted individual program, sabotaging her life professionally, socially, medically, and financially. And with the help of her spiritual guide, she continues to defend herself and speak out to educate. Today, she's an award-winning author, artist, activist, educator, intuitive, and pastoral counselor. So in our first three interviews, Jean shared her other dimensional and mind-control experiences from childhood, her two marriages, and her first few years as a desert hermit. In this fourth interview, we pick up her story where we left off in her early hermit years. Let me put her mic on and welcome Jean Ann Eisenhower. Welcome back.
Thank you.
This is
glad to be here.
4. Did I say part 4? Yes. We're so happy to have you. So this is part 4. So I know that I think you re-listened to the show, and we always miss something. Well, what did we miss in the first 3 interviews that you would like to cover before we continue in the journey of your life story?
Right. We did leave out, when I put together my notes, I meant to check them against my database because I just didn't have time. And I need my database because my mind has been fractured and I have different memories in different parts of my brain. So 5 years ago, I started putting them all in a database so that one person who speaks can access my notes and remember things that all my other alters know and have kind of downloaded into this database. So that's why I'm so dependent on having my notes, because the one alter who talks can't always remember everything. I can, but I'm slow, and it's just difficult, and if I'm under pressure, I have a hard time.
Yeah.
So thank you for letting me go back and pick up stuff that I just forgot. And one of the things I wanted to talk about having forgotten was that my mind control life, all necessarily just mind control. When I was at home, I was often left by myself with books and crafts, and I remember not having much access to my parents and being able to just talk and socialize. So I didn't have anyone to talk to but the dog and the cats and the houseplants and outside the trees. And I had a rich relationship with these animals and plants. And when I started, talking about the things that I experienced, I learned really quickly that most adults in America did not want to hear about your communications with plants and animals. And so I learned to repress it, and I repressed it very, very well. And I didn't pick this back up again until my hermit years. But
let's focus on
was
that
talking
a minute,
to plants and animals. And
okay,
even
so were you
more
having verbal conversations, or were they telepathic? Tell us more about your communication.
Well, I don't remember very many I just know that I did communicate, and I knew that certain plants and animals had opinions about what was going on in the house, and that they were disapproving a lot. But the more exciting and more powerful thing that happened was that I also was connecting with other dimensional beings, in particular with beings that I believe are my family on other realms. So when I would be lying in bed at night, waiting to go to sleep, and I would suddenly experience this portal opening up, and I would go through the portal. And I did talk about this a little bit in one of our earlier interviews, I think our very first one. And Sasha had asked me, what was the portal like? And I remember that the very first, and we were having at the same time a hard time communicating. We were breaking up, so that story didn't get told well. He was asking what the portal was like. And in my child's eye, it was like a pinwheel, you remember those pinwheels that we would make in grade school
Oh,
or
yes.
even kindergarten? And we'd blow on them and they'd spin around. So that's how I thought of it. And I was very excited by pinwheels and kind of fascinated by them all my life. And whenever the pinwheel or this sensation would happen, it would have this bodily sensation. And I had this visual image in my mind, but I don't know what it exactly was, but I imagined it as a pinwheel. And I knew that my family was coming to get me again. And I was so grateful for that. And I would just be as happy as I ever was. And then I would come back with no memory except for the feeling in my body that I was loved and that everything was fine. Everything was fine. But I never felt like everything was fine unless I had just gone to the other realms and come back. So those were the sorts of other dimensional and, other dimensional experiences and communications that I was having throughout my childhood. And it was I don't know if it was a side effect of mind control or if it might have actually even been an intended effect, because it turns out that as I've studied mind control, they are very interested in people's psychic abilities. So for them to instruct my parents to leave me alone a lot would allow me to develop those skills. Mm-hmm.
Right. I wanted to comment on leaving your parents leaving you alone and not having much. You don't have much to interact with, but in terms of human sense, and so you end up reaching for other things. And so my parents did the same thing. I don't know if they were a part of a program or not. Part of it, I think, was because my mother wasn't quite all there. That's the best way to put it.
Yeah.
She was highly intelligent, but I think she was part of the program, whatever this program is. And so, she would just didn't know how to raise a little girl. She didn't really know what to do. She could get pregnant, she could give birth, but she, looking back, and I love my mother. She's dead. She died in 1997, and she was horrible to me, but I understand she had been screwed with. And so this might be going back, like in your family and my family, because they seem to do this in families for several generations.
I absolutely believe that.
Right. So my dad was in World War II. My mother,
my father
was
too.
A product of, they came back and everybody was horny and breeding and making the baby boomers, and we were coming out left and right to replace all those people who died in the war.
And they sort of invented the nuclear family about that time. It was when, families decided that they didn't need to live with their parents. And, it used to be multi-generational families where grandma would live with the family, but not after the war. Everybody had their own home and was very proud of the whole nuclear family thing. But I think that mothers, without, elders around, they didn't know how to take care of their kids, is my guess.
I would agree. And I noticed I grew up in a family neighborhood where it was pretty consistent the whole time I was growing up. That wasn't that the following generation, they traveled, they were what do they call them? The yuppies, after the 60s and 70s, and the yuppies came and everybody just started relocating around the country. So all those, but the neighbors I had in childhood were the neighbors I had until they died, basically. And so there were several families that had their grandmothers, mostly the grandmothers. The grandfathers seemed to die out early on, but there were several, 2 or 3 of them had Grandma Chris, Grandma Gummel. I mean, we would all call them Grandma, right? I'm going to go over and even if it wasn't my grandma, it was Grandma. So that was cute. But so since that was common in that generation, my mother was traumatized because her grandmother and her mother and her grandmother were dead, and so they weren't around to help her raise the children. So I think she felt traumatized by that. But go ahead, back to your story. I just digressed. I had a few questions about that. But go ahead.
Well, I'm glad to hear the things that we have in common because you have a similar history to mine. So It's all really, really interesting. That's about all of my young childhood that I wanted to tell you about.
Well, you triggered a memory with the pinwheels, and I forgot they even existed. But weren't they a common thing that was out in the stores at the time around the 4th of July? You get the patriotic pinwheels, and you would run around with the pinwheel in the wind.
Yeah, you'd buy them at the 5 and dime. Remember the 5 and dime?
I know. To really talk about some things, well, even in our generation, it wasn't always 5 and dime. You could get things for 5 and 10 cents in the 60s. Yes, definitely. Yeah. So, we had a G.C. Murphy. Did you have a Murphy's?
No,
like the old-fashioned
in a different part
Murphy's
of the country.
Well, that was real common in the East, and they have the, they were, I guess it came in the turn of the century, right? And so they were still there in the 50s, and wood floors that would creak, and they were like 2-story, maybe 3 stories, and everything was in there, It was like you need a sewing needles, they were there. Comic books, they were there. Coloring books, they were there. So very common place to go. The 5 and dime. G.C. Murphy called the 5 and dime. Yeah. Okay. So pinwheels. That seems to be almost like clowns, like a trigger memory.
I don't
have a clown thing.
No, but I've heard that clowns are pretty common for people to have experienced and be afraid of, but that just doesn't happen to be mine. The different programs, they had different themes, and so I've heard of themes of colors, and I totally relate to colors. Like I have real strong reactions against red and blue, primary red, primary blue, the colors that are in the American flag. And they say that the red was sexual programming and the blue was programming, and green was a different sort of programming. And I don't have any reaction against green, but I definitely have it against red and blue. So anyway, I think I had color programming. And then people talk about different Disney movies being triggers.
Yeah, Disney.
And I have been extremely triggered by Alice in Wonderland. I just could get beside myself around that movie. It really terrified me. And
that was when they sat us down alone, right? You're alone, and go watch Alice in Wonderland. And that was
really.
Oh yeah,
I don't
set me
relate
up
to the
in front of the
watching it
TV.
alone thing. That's what I'm reacting to.
I watched it alone, and it was kind of freaky for a 4 or 5-year-old to watch by herself.
Yeah,
and
it is a
so
terrifying
tell me about
movie.
what's your freak out with it? Yeah, it was terrifying.
Well, the
fun.
queen really scared me badly.
Yeah.
And just the fact that she fell down a hole, and then she's really big, and then she's really tiny, and then she's with these bizarre people making demands, and it was horrible.
I know. My mom said, I'm going, this isn't fun.
I know.
Thanks, Mom. Yeah. Well, I'll tell you real briefly the clown thing, because I think it goes with the Disney thing. So when I was in the amusement park called Kennywood Park, all of a sudden everybody disappeared, and I got sidetracked by this laughing fat lady, and it was like a Disney character, right? It was animated, and it kept throwing its head back and go, and then it would collapse, and then it would throw its head back. And so I was watching that, and then everybody disappeared, and then they came back and got me. So after that, I don't know what happened. Did I get taken on board? I don't know. It's a screen memory, right? But for years and years and years, I mean like 20, 30 years, I'm a little girl. I'm walking towards this building in the difference. It's got a big clown entryway. Sometimes it's a big mouth. You go in there, the mirror. It's like, oh my God! It kept going into this nightmare around the freaking clowns just because when I was a 4 or 5-year-old, whatever happened. So, and that's Disney did something similar. So the little girl, and I would see myself, the little girl going towards the building with the big clown face as the doorway, the mouth, is, ugh. So I still don't know what that's about. But what did you have in, Stuart Swerdlow was here, he was saying a lot of people have the Disney program. So what's your Disney program?
I don't know.
Remember.
I just know that,
you don't know.
It's Alice in Wonderland, and these two colors are triggers, and and I don't think I've uncovered much more. I've heard of some people having gemstone programming. I don't know. I don't relate to that, but it could be that it's just there and hasn't been discovered yet.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's go back to your story.
Well, another thing that I knew that I had left out, a really strange experience of reading palms in grade school. I'd gotten this book on palm reading, and I had studied it, and I went to school, of course, and I offered to read my friends' palms. And so I remember doing it a little bit, and actually maybe doing it a lot. But one day after I'd been doing this a very, very long time, and maybe I'd even forgotten about it, some girls came up to me on the playground and asked if I'd read, one girl's palm. And so I had this little half circle of girls around me, and I took her palm, and I started reading just according to what I'd read in the book. This line means this line means that. And then I went into an altered state that I didn't remember the altered state. I don't remember anything about the altered state, but I remember coming out of the altered state, and I didn't even know the word trance or anything at the time. But I knew, I came out of a trance, was aware of coming out of a trance, was kind of shocked at the idea that I had just been unconscious. I knew I'd been talking, but I didn't know what I was saying. And then the next thing I notice is all of these girls are standing there with their mouths open, looking in absolute, utter shock at me. And I told myself, you better never do that again. So I apparently had the ability to go into an altered state without intending to. And I don't know what that means.
Did you get any feedback on what you said? Or
no,
did
and I don't even know who those girls were. So I've actually thought about going to our high school website that has about 4 of our grade schools, so only 1/4 of them were my grade school, and just asking if anybody remembers, but I cannot imagine how I would word that and not just come off sounding really weird. So I just decided not to ask.
It might be interesting. Say, did anybody ever get a palm reading from me when we were kids? Because that triggered. See, this is how we trigger each other. Always, people.
Yeah.
There was something about we were playing at the neighbor's house, and I don't know why the palm thing was related, but I guess it was like abilities to do other things beyond the normal, right? So I'm sitting on a step, and one of the girls. Some of the girls were really loud and rambunctious, and I was kind of reserved, right? So she's like going down the steps, and she jumps off, and she twists on the end of the rail. So she has the rail, and she jumps, and she twists, and so she's facing us after she's done. And she goes, wow, I have this deja vu. And all of a sudden, we're all launched into past lives and stuff. Now, these are all little good Christian girls, right? Wow. If I mentioned anything about reincarnation, my mother would have a fit. And she'd say, that's the work of a demon and the devil. And da, da, da. Then all of a sudden, all these good little Christian girls are, defying our parents' generation and talking about reincarnation. And we were loving it. And we were getting ourselves worked up into what like you guys were doing, or you did, into a trance state about the thought of we had past lives and that this was we were remembering something from before. So that awareness that you can remember something from outside of the world we were living in. It's like, okay, there's some kind of paranormal metaphysical force. So that was like my first awareness of the girls starting to talk about that. And then we started gathering and in the summer with sleep outs on the porch, we were allowed to sleep. Ghost stories going on and on about ghost stories. So all of us were fascinated. So I can just see us doing. I'm pretty sure somebody was doing the palm readings because I had awareness coming into my adulthood from that people were able to read palms. So that came in there somewhere too. So were you accurate? Did you have anything when you were doing it? Was it?
Oh,
it seemed to be accurate.
I don't remember ever being accurate because most of what we were talking about how many children would you have. It was based on these little crinkles at the edge of your pinky and your health and your destiny. And so those were all things that are going to be meaningful in adulthood. But for children, they just weren't. It was just kind of a fun little lark, but never was able to check whether any of it came true. I don't remember what my readings were.
Yeah, but they were, yeah. Did you ever do the pendulum? We were doing pendulums when we were
Not
kids.
back then.
And so you mentioned children.
So you did that as a child?
We would hold. Yes, somebody showed us the pendulum. So you would hold your palm up, and they would go on your wrist. So your palm's up on the wrist, and they would do a pendulum. You would grab anything to make a pendulum, right? And you could count how many children you were going to have and what sex they were. I don't remember how it worked, but everybody's going, me next. How many children am I going to have? What are they going to be, boy or girl? And now this might be significant. They said they kept going until there was like 13 kids. I said, stop. No way. I'm not having 13 kids, but maybe I do as a contest. Because I was like, no. I don't even like kids that much. I don't want to have 13 of them. Oh, my God. So, wow. Okay. Anything else on the palm reading? So they you don't know what they said. You just saw their faces.
Nope.
That's probably why nobody would.
Yeah, I just thought it was significant that I was able to go into a trance without intending at a young age. And now it's very significant to me, and it makes sense. As a dissociative mind control subject with multiple personalities, of course I could go into a trance, but I sure didn't intend to. It just happened and was a little bit alarming.
Right.
And
so you felt out of control.
Yeah. But, lots of things. Yeah, I did feel out of control, and it was a little bit scary. And what I told myself was, you'll never do this again. And I never, ever read another palm after that. It scared me badly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was probably good. You protected yourself. So what about your telepathy with your sister? How were you even aware about, that people could be telepathic?
Yeah, we've heard about it here and there. I don't know where I'd ever heard about it, but we were on family vacation. We had a station wagon, and it was late at night. My dad was driving, and all of his kids were falling asleep in the back of the car. We put down the front or the second seat, so there's big extended space, and we're just curled up in different manners. And my head was right next to my sister's head. And I was lying there thinking about how when I laid in the sun, after swimming and closed my eyes, or maybe it's open eyes, I can't remember, but when you can see little dust motes that are sitting on your eyes and you can just kind of see them floating around. And, that's the sort of thing that a child would, like study and look at. Well, I had just we were in high school back then. I think we must have been in high school because we had studied a thing called the paramecium. It's a little organism that's was early in high school science. And I was wondering, and I dismissed the idea. I didn't think it could be paramecium in our eyes. I thought probably not. But though the pictures under the microscope did look something like, these dust motes floating around. And I thought it could be, but probably wasn't. We would have heard about it, and so I just dismissed it. But right then, my sister speaks up and she just talks to our parents. Hey, Mom and Dad, are those things floating around in our eyes paramecium?
Oh,
and
my God.
I just thought that was really quite amazing. It was just, all these little psychic things, and possibly these are normal. I don't know if they're normal or not. People don't talk about them that much.
Right.
Our culture so convinces us not to talk about psychic phenomena. And so I think I told my sister at the time, but anyway, it's just like one more of those things. It's like I seem to have developed a lot of psychic ability at a very young age. And
did you ever try to do that consciously? Did you ever try to do that?
But I didn't try it long enough to actually know whether I was getting successful or not. So no, I haven't. And I should.
We would have a big picnic every year with several families, and it was a property that had two big yards that connected, so lots of room. At the end of the yard was a forest, and there was just stuff you could do. You could run up and down this yard all day long, play tug of war and stuff like that. And so in the evening, we would gather. They would have the basement door open to the yard so we could go back and forth. And they put the torches out and stuff. And so we would go into this one room in the basement, a bunch of us, and they would put a mask on, blindfold on us, and they would put just any kind of magazine, and they'd say, okay, tell us when you can see a color in your mind, and rub your fingers over it and tell us what color you're seeing, right?
Ooh.
And we're doing all these kind of games on developing your psychic abilities. And I'm thinking back when we talking about your telepathy, like, why were we doing that? Where was that coming from?
Right.
How did we even know to do psychic games like that?
Not in normal America.
Yeah.
That was avoided.
And the kids were slightly older. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Wow.
These kids were slightly older, and it's like, oh, and then the pinwheel thing. Remember the little things that you made and you put on your hands, and you would put little keywords on it, and then you would ask a question, and it was the same pinwheel type thing.
Yeah,
I bet you this generation.
They were constructed slightly different. They started with squares, but they were constructed differently. We called them cootie catchers, and then later on, fortune-telling things.
Right. Now, these kids don't know how to do that, right? Well, we were making them.
Yeah.
And telling fortunes with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Who was directing us?
I don't know. It was just something that came up on the playground.
Older children knew about it, and then they would come to the next generation.
Yeah. Actually, I remember I remember my father teaching us how to fold those things up and to fit them on our hand, and and what
I wonder if there's a YouTube on that.
Yeah.
You call them pooties? How you spelling that?
Well, what my dad did. Now, this is way old. Now, he's going back to his childhood in the 30s. Instead of fortune-telling with all these different answers that might be inside, they only had two answers. It could either say he put his fingers in it, and then he'd put it on our head and act like he was trying to catch something, and then he'd open it up, and it would either show that you had cooties, or he'd open up the other direction and show that you didn't have cooties, because there'd be little dots.
Oh! It was a cootie detector.
That's how, so that goes way back to the 30s. Who knows how old that is?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Anyway, those things, see, I'm an Aquarian, so I was going, anything paranormal, ghosts, psychic, it was exciting for me and interesting for me. So let me see. Let me look at my list. So, okay, so you had the knowledge when you were very young that TV was not good for us. What does that mean? Why
Yeah,
isn't it good for us? What wasn't good?
I remember being pretty young, like maybe 14, 15 years old, coming home from school, and I was always active in different things after school, taking dance classes and stuff. So I come home from school, and all three of my siblings are sitting in front of the television. And they were there every single day just staring at the TV, watching a lot of stupid stuff. And I remember thinking that this is really, really bad and that we should not watch TV like that. And I would just walk through the room and say, you know, TV is not good for you. You shouldn't be watching that much TV. And I don't know where I got this from. Like Marshall McLuhan, I don't think he had started publishing yet.
Right.
Gary Mander hadn't. I mean, there's been a lot of people who've written about television starting in, I think, the 60s, late 60s, early 70s. But I don't know how I knew this. I don't think I had access to those thinkers, but I felt absolutely certain that television was bad and that you should not be watching it. And I got rid of my television not very many years after that. When I was a young adult, 1974, so I would have been 22 years old. I got rid of my television in 74, and I never got one again.
Well, see, my mother stuck me in front of certain programs to program me. So one I had was I Love Lucy, Romper Room, let's see, what was it? Romper Room, the Flintstones, and the Jetsons. The Flintstones was really addictive when Betty and Barney were getting together and having a baby. I mean, it was so addictive. It was like, Mom, I'm going to play out in the yard, but when it's 7 and the Flintstones come on, please come and get me, right? So you started, like, getting dependent on these television shows. The Disney stuff was really mesmerizing. And when Walt died, so Walt would come up and introduce the episode that night, and he always had like a big line, and that would jump up on his desk or something. He would have some kind of animal, and so you'd get like, oh, look at this man, and he's playing with some dangerous animal, but it's friendly with him, and then you'd watch the episode of, which always had the When You Wish Upon a Star with. What was that? Cricket, Jiminy Cricket. That was a lot of programming there, and that was when I have to watch this. Yeah. I had to watch it. I had to be home. I had to make sure. And then later came Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, and it's like I have to be home. I have to watch that. There was something going on there. There were certain programs that you had to watch. So I think you're spot on. But you know, the one I never fell for, though, but everybody fell for, was Dark Shadows.
And we were never allowed to watch
the
that one. Yeah, we couldn't watch that one.
My girlfriends were watching it, and I said, I don't want to watch that. I was repulsed by it. I said, I don't know what you guys get out of it, but I'm not watching that one. And they go, oh, it's so good. Barnabas Collins.
Well, I used to, when I was probably 16, I know I was old enough to drive, and I suddenly became completely fascinated by the whole vampire mythos. And because I could drive, I would take my siblings to the drive-in. Anytime there was a vampire movie on, I wanted to watch them, and I still have this fascination. I haven't read much of, what's her name, who writes all those vampire movies, books. I've read one of them.
What's her name? Ann
Wright? Yeah, Ann Wright. Yeah. And I find them fascinating, and I think there's some level of reality there, and I think that explains why I was so fascinated. I just wanted to get close and understand this strange metaphysical thing that is this long time, story that's been with humanity for so long. I wanted to understand it. I was fascinated. But we would come home and we would be so scared we'd all sleep together in my bed.
See, now I loved Interview with the Vampire. with young Brad Pitt and Tom Cruise. And then there was another one. Yeah, there was a bunch of really good vampire movies. But that was old. I was older. I was an adult. It was in
right.
So what vampire movies were? So you're just a point of reference. I was born in '54. You were born in what year?
52.
Okay, so you're like the age of in between me and my older sister. Okay, so you're driving. So you would have been cool. We would have loved you. Hey, come take us later, right? And so what vampire movies were out?
I have no
back
idea
then?
what movies they were. They might have even just been B movies that, nobody remembers today. I don't remember what they are. But it's a common theme. There were a few of them that summer, and we would go see them. And I remember just wanting so badly to get this. I got to get this. There's something important here, but I just didn't know what it was. And I'm still not sure exactly what the connection is. I find real subtle connections. I'm still working on figuring out the mythos and how it applies.
The one that really got me was, what was it called? The Raven. And the Raven was
Edgar Allan
Boris
Poe?
Karloff. Yeah, it was Boris Karloff and who was the other one? Oh my goodness, I'm going to pull it up right now. The Raven. Anyway, they had a scene where the two were battling. And they were shooting beams at it, or energy beams to each other, and knocking each other over, right? Movie, Raven movie. I think it was 1965 or something. No, where's the original one? The original one. They got another one. Vincent Price and Boris Karloff. Oh my God! It was just, they had this magical fight scene, and when I'm watching it at the movie theater, and I had gone to the bathroom, and I was coming back. I was top of the aisle, ready to walk down. It's like, well, I want to stop and see this because I didn't want to be, having to watch where I was going, so I would fall over. And the beam shooting out, and I felt my hands, like the palms of my hands, and I'm going, that's where they come out. And it's like I had this flashback to somewhere. It wasn't a previous human incarnation, but I had a flashback to, I can do that. I've done that before. I know what that feels like. I know what it's like. And I was like, I never could explain that. Who was it that I was able to shoot beams out of my hand? But it also had Peter Lorre and a very young Jack Nicholson, and it was just a classic. Everyone can, from 1963. So yeah, I was only nine years old. I wasn't even 10. I'm watching this, so fascination. And then remember the one with the Children of the Damned, or the eyes? It was about the British
my movie
children.
watching has been spotty. I haven't been very consistent with television. Well, totally not with TV at all, and not consistent even with movies. Sometimes I watch lots of them, and sometimes I don't. So I've missed a lot of popular culture, kind of intentionally.
Well, this was from 1964, and it was the original one. First of all, everybody got turned off in the town, and when they all came to, there were a bunch of women that were pregnant, and the children, doesn't matter what the parents looked like, the children all came out blonde-haired, blue eyes, and their eyes glowed, and they had psychic abilities, and they took over the town. It was like, somebody knew what was going on back in 60. Oh, that
very scary stuff.
Wow. I highly recommend watching it because they took over. They took over the village, and it's like, what are we going to do? So anyway, I'm not going to give away the ending, but...
Well, that's really interesting.
It's called Village of the Damned. Yeah, Village of the Damned. And then the sequel was Children of the Damned. Right. It was like it was so amazing. So there was alien abductions.
Really?
And impregnation of women. And here it was back in 19...
a lot of very weird storyline for that era. You wouldn't think that they would have been talking about that back then. Yeah.
1960. Oh, my God.
Well, they were starting to get us ready. I mean, the Twilight Zone was introducing us to lots of interesting ideas. So, yeah, they were starting to get us ready. And I, too, remember the Jetsons. And the whole family sat down to watch the Jetsons every night. They're getting us ready to understand, I think.
They're getting us ready.
Yep.
So this is before Betty and Barney Hill. 1960. It's just interesting to put all. I'm going to actually do this as part of my book, is to tie in all the stuff to the ET phenomenon, because I think, like you're saying right now, they have been getting us ready for a long time. And this was one of them. So this was before Betty and Barney Hill, and this concept. Now I don't know if Betty and Barney Hill saw the Village of the Dam in 1960, but when I put it in reference to me, I was only 6 years old. So somebody took me to the movie theater and brought me home, but that thing haunted me. And I kept looking in the mirror, and I'm going, am I one of them? Am I one of these children? Am I I was basically, to pull it through, am I a hybrid? Because I didn't think I was normal.
You could look in the mirror and you were blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and wondered.
But the psychic abilities and stuff, it's like, do I really have those abilities? Wow. Okay, so you don't remember the names. If you think of that, see, now this is the unpacking. I think that whenever you do this unpacking, because a lot of us are kind of controlled and manipulated and whatever, you're going to start to get your whole story. And part of it is like writing it down.
I want to acknowledge you and Sasha for the questioning and asking for more detail and all. I feel like I'm doing a lot of important work to process stuff that I've been writing about, but haven't processed quite enough. So anyway, these interviews have been really useful, and I kind of sometimes wonder if we're going to finish them all up, and I'm going to be in a whole different place than I was when we started. It might be an interesting thing to watch, to observe as it unfolds. So thank you.
I'm doing mine too. You've encouraged me to. I had a lot of notes, and I'm starting to write it up. I've started a blog. I'm not worried about publishing it or money. I'm just going to, as I get a story down, I'm going to post it. I'm moving because this is so helpful and therapeutic, and I know that when I get through this, it's going to be amazing. Yeah, and go ahead.
And it's helpful to others too. It helps us to write it all down, but my whole purpose of putting it out there in the world is so that others who are going through the same thing can read it and say, oh, okay, I'm not the only one, and here, she's got some insight on it, and maybe this helps explain. So, yeah, it's important for you to keep writing, Janet.
Yeah, yesterday I did a couple chapters. I have a lot of it written up, and I'm here for you. If you want to send me anything that you've written, right now we're doing, so I'll just explain to our listeners, we're doing like questions and talking points for Jean, but it's actually, I've done that for myself. What question, like I might have like an initial little kind of the tip of the iceberg memory, right? And it's like, oh, there's more to that. I know there's a lot more to that. How do I get that? Well, I could go and get my husband to do regression therapy or go to another regression therapist and sit down and do a sick. But a lot of it is available for yourself. But what I realized is you have to, nobody can do it for you, right? You have to do it yourself. So thank God I know how to type. So I sit there and I just do a flow of consciousness, right? And it's like,
great, yeah.
And you said that to me. You said, Janet, just do a flow of consciousness. Don't worry about editing it. Don't worry about what you're saying. Just do a flow of consciousness and get it down. And so then I go back. Sometimes like, it's like when you went into your trance and you were doing the palm reading. Like, wow, I must have been in a trance. I don't remember writing that. I don't remember. It's like, but that's pretty amazing. Like, where did that come from? So your subconscious is like the Akashic records, and it has recorded your entire existence from your first breath to your last. And you think you don't know, you think you don't remember, but if you just allow your fingers to fly, you're going to get a lot of information. Your subconscious, superconscious, your higher self, it's going to just start telling you what you need to know, what you've been, the answers to the questions you've been asking.
And for those of us who have been had our minds fractured, there's things in different parts of our brain that we don't always have access to. But when you sit down intending to uncover things, then you can get things from other parts that you just otherwise wouldn't know.
So I encourage everybody to write your story, to develop. We all need to be witnessed. Commit to, 2, 3, 4, 5 of your friends or whatever and say, I'm going to witness you. Feel free to call me, to share, to email it to me, and I promise to hold your confidence and not betray you or reveal it. But I'm here for you. Let me be your witness. So, and I don't have that yet, but it's like an idea, right? Well, maybe we should develop a little circle, somebody to trust.
We could use a support group for sure. Sometimes I feel like I'm being, with my fractured mind, I have one altar who's witnessing for all the others, and the others are witnessing for the one, and that actually helps to start tying my altar parts together again, for me to even just write them, but to speak about them. Then all my other altars get to hear the whole story, and I think I start knitting myself together better again. So it's therapeutic in a whole lot of ways to tell our stories.
Right. In therapy, my husband and I have worked with hundreds, not thousands of people. We call it retrieving the lost pieces of your soul. Because even if you're not fractured in the mind control program, trauma will send a lot of your memories into your subconscious. It's just the natural protection mechanism of being alive, right? And so, but in the MK Ultra, they intentionally use trauma to fracture people and create subpersonalities and alters and fractals and what a crazy planet. Right? Oh my God, they do that? Who's the they that do that? We don't even know who the they is half the time. But
I know.
They've just become aware that we're somewhere like an underground base or some military thing often. But they've been doing some of this stuff. I hear stories about they did this in schools. They would take kids out, class, and next thing you know, you get all this shit happening. And oh wow.
Yep.
Okay. Anything else on TV? That launched a whole thread of consciousness.
I just stayed away from TV for most of my life, and I'm really, really grateful for it. I feel like it has helped me to have a worldview that has been allowed to evolve naturally in relation to the earth and to other people, and not so much the cultural program that they're trying to tell everybody this is reality. And I'm really, really grateful for whichever angel who put that idea in my head and convinced me of its truth. I'm just really grateful. I think it helped me step outside the culture and watch it from outside and make judgments and decide what I didn't want to be involved with and what I did want to be involved with. And it's I know that my mind works differently than most people, and I like it.
Well, you're like my husband, Sasha. He hated TV. He's there. I don't want to sit inside. I want to play. You guys are crazy. You're going to watch this box for your whole life? So he rejected it. But I think part of what mine was is my mother used it to, well, I get in her mind she might have been saying to entertain me. Whoever was her handler was, getting her to act in a way that would further, fracture me and have me pliable and susceptible. So in the 60s, I got married in the 70s. I got married in 1970. So I was with a very abusive man, and he would make my life miserable if I, went out a lot, right? I couldn't have a lot of interest outside of the home. I could, go to a Tupperware party or whatever. It was like he was my father, right? And for some reason, I permitted it. I allowed it. My mother was like, "You're supposed to listen to your husband." It was just this whole programming. So I spent most of in the 70s in front of a TV. But I became really good at those. There was a game they had where you pick categories, and when I had movies and TVs, I kicked ass. I remember in the 80s there was a game we played. I knew all the actors, all the movies, and they go, "How do you know that stuff?" Little did they know I was held prisoner, for 10, 15 years.
Well, I didn't watch TV, but I was also held prisoner. It's like my husband was the only person I related to practically. I had very, very few friends, and they were hardly friends at all. I was just a housewife, and that was it, housewife and mom, and I listened to Christian radio and watched no television at all. Yeah.
Oh, my God. Yeah, see, that's programming.
Yeah, I kept a really clean house. That's all you can say about
it.
Yeah,
you have to. I mean, I like keeping a clean house, but I'll tell you what, there was anything out of place, there was hell to be paid. And this man was like, "Your job is to be a wife," or that. And it's like, what? It's not that he said it. It's like, why did I buy into it and obey it? I don't understand that. It was like,
right. Well, we were culturally programmed very, very well. Think of all the commercials we watched, where the woman is just delighting over how clean her floor is or her carpet is. We watched
I got my oven clean. Know. Oh, my God. You guys out there, this generation, you are so lucky. But we were all Borg and Stepford wives. Ugh.
Well, I feel sorry for the generations that have come after us, because they've been programmed by more than the television. The television and the movies and the computers now. Oh my goodness, I don't know how anybody has a chance to have a free brain at this point in American history. I just don't understand at all.
Yeah, and when we die, we'll come back to this. What will we be? We'll just be like, I hope we don't all become totally. I call it the Borging of America. We're getting bored.
I think you're right. I think we are. Mhm.
So, what was going on with your? What was it? Your youngest sibling? Was it a girl? Who's the youngest in your family?
A girl.
You said, tell us about your youngest UFO sighting. Or was that you talking about yourself? I'm sorry, a little bit. Maybe I had that wrong.
Yeah. My very first UFO sighting was very strange. I don't even remember what it looked like. This is the deal. It's a beautiful summer evening. The sun's about to go down, or maybe it has gone down. We're outside. The weather's beautiful. And Mom and Dad are pointing into the sky, and they are both saying, "What is that? That's so odd. What is that?" And my memory is of being absolutely flippin' terrified of whatever they were looking at. And my memory brings up a whole bunch of weird associations that seem to be related to, and I haven't gone back to watch the movie Peter Pan in a long time. Forever. But I have associated with it that there's a mountain that is moving through the air, and it has a bunch of things dangling from beneath it, I am flippin' terrified. And I can't believe that my parents are so calmly going, oh, what is that? That's really strange. What is that? And somehow I feel like I know what it is. And it is really, really scary. And I cannot believe that they aren't scared to death like I am. So they're pointing into the sky. And I don't know what they were looking at, but I had associations with something in the sky that was terrifying. So I feel like I must have had some UFO experience at a young age. And at that time, I couldn't have been older than 8, but I'm feeling like I was younger. I'm feeling like I was 5 or something, just judging by the house that we were in. Oh, I couldn't have been any older than 7, actually. But anyway, that was my first UFO. And then I had a second UFO sighting when I was 9. And I was living my parents had put my bedroom in the den, and it didn't have normal windows in the den. It had a very high window that I could only look out if I stepped on my bed. So I almost never looked out the window.
Right.
And one day I just had the urge to look out the window, and I look out, and there goes this very strange thing that I have seen diagrammed on back in the 60s when the very first UFO, well, I guess it was earlier than that, when the very first earliest UFO groups were trying to educate the public. I saw a photo one time with this guy holding a poster board, and he had diagrams of different sorts of ships that had been seen and described. And one of them was the one that I saw. And I was so glad to see that. I was like, oh, there it is. That's the one I saw. And it was flying over this hotel that was near our house. And it was silent, and it wasn't far away. It was pretty close. We lived just less than a quarter mile, like an eighth of a mile from the hotel. And it had, I don't know how to describe it without using my hands, and that's not going to help. It had colorful lights that were turning around on it, and it was just moving so slowly across. You'd say, well, it must be a helicopter, but it was not shaped anything like a helicopter, and it was larger than a helicopter, and it was silent, and it had multicolored lights that were twirling around. So I think it was a UFO, and I'm not sure I told anybody about it because my parents had already started denouncing the things that I had to say, and so I just wasn't going to give them one more thing to denounce, so I just kept it to myself.
Wow.
So those were 2 UFOs in my childhood.
I want to take it back. You mentioned Peter Pan. Now, Peter Pan was one of those screen memories. And let me pull that up. When was Peter Pan? The Peter Pan we saw was the Mary Martin Peter Pan. And Mary Martin was a woman, and she was playing the boy.
Was that on stage
TV
or a movie?
It was a stage production, but she did a. It was black and white. It was on TV. And we all watched it. And when we were done, oh, my God, was it 55? No, maybe. Oh, here's a TV movie, 1960. So I would have been 6 years old. Anyway, after this is the one with Mary Martin. Anyway, I'm trying to pull it up. Anyway, so it was black and white, and Mary Martin, 1955. So I'm a 1-year-old.
Wow.
And I thought I was older, but anyway, because I remember this.
Well, you could.
So we all started acting out.
Mhm.
When it was over, we're jumping on the beds. We're so excited. We're going, I'm flying, and my mother was upset. She said, go to bed, go to sleep. Okay, so it must have been in 56. They said it was captured live on TV in 55 and again in 56. Okay, that makes more sense. I would have been 2. That's what I remember. And
it could have been replayed, Janet, so you could have been older also. Right?
Right.
It could have just been replayed.
I remember, though, it was a live thing, and I don't think they... anyway, I'm trying to get, because my brother and sister. My brother's 7 years older, so it had to be interesting to him, and my sister's 5. So they're jumping around. We're all jumping around. So I'm old enough to jump around in the bed. So I got up to bed. I'm jumping around with my brother and sister, and there was a couple of beds, and we're jumping around the beds. And my mother's like, calm down, calm down. And so she got upset, and she grabbed my brother, and she grabbed him by his feet, and she pounded his head on the floor. And then she grabbed my sister, and she said, be quiet or I'm going to, so she would threaten us with, bodily harm to our siblings if we didn't calm down. And then she finally she comes to me, she goes, and I'm going to throw your little sister over the banister, over the stairs. And she had done that before. My mother was crazy, right? And she'd done it before. And so this time, I remember she let me go. And my dad, who usually ignored all the screaming, came around the corner and he caught me before I hit the ground. And I went, did that really happen? To this day, I go, did that really happen?
I wonder.
But I have a clear memory of it. And we wonder. So that, I think, triggered it because we were just like out of control. It's like Star Wars was. The Star Wars was a program for the whole world in the whatever year it was, 77. And so we were out of control. We were going sometimes and watching it, 15, 20 times. It was like we're out of control because we overreacted to the programming. And we're all
or else there's something, there's something in us that just really wants to see that again. Something, it's speaking to something in us that we're unconscious for, I'm thinking.
Did you react to Star Wars, or was there any kind of program or movie that you saw?
I was so inspired, but you know what my reaction was to Star Trek? I would not give it the time of day, and I felt like I had this huge judgment about it, that it was simply beneath me. And it's that I'm kind of thinking now, did I have a subconscious memory of space travel and interactions and everything, and I thought this was just a really stupid rendition of something I thought was much more nuanced and interesting. I don't know.
And I had the opposite reaction. I loved Star Trek. I got so involved that when I got older in my late teens, early 20s, I was working with the production crews of these giant conferences with 20,000 people. I flew to New York. I worked on the Pittsburgh one. We had 10,000 people in Pittsburgh, 20,000 people in New York, and I was a volunteer. And, I saved up my money, and I went, and it's like, wow. I fell in love with it. I fell in love with Leonard Nimoy, and I ended up marrying a similar body type, and, so I was just kind of like a Leonard Nimoy, the same heritage, same lineage, and it's like, and I go, I married Spock because I imprinted that, right? Like I imprinted with the Beatles, but then later, Leonard Nimoy came, and it's like, I switched from Paul to John because John was the intelligent one. I went from, the cute one to I like intelligence, and that just shaped my dating years. Like, are you smart? No, it's not. My first husband wasn't smart enough. I got bored, so I ended up divorcing him because he just wasn't able to keep up with me mentally.
Interesting.
He was not Spock.
Yeah.
Okay. So you had those UFO sightings, and these were young. You were young.
Yeah.
And I know we've covered some of your other ones in your adult years, so we didn't. This is something we had missed. Your young ones. So, anything else about sightings?
I guess we're talking about nothing without jumping back into the future. So we're just catching up the old stuff. And,
okay, we'll catch up. Okay, so then you wrote that a friend called you a split personality in 7th grade. So 7th grade. Yeah. For you would have been what year? What year are we talking about? This gives us a,
would I be 12 or 13? I forget.
Yeah.
I think
like
I would have been 12.
You said the year
I would have
turns
been 12.
13. Yeah. Uh-huh.
So, yeah, my girlfriend mentioned some sexual play from 2 years earlier when I was in 5th grade, only 10 years old. And I looked at her like, you're crazy. I never did that. And she just kept insisting I did. And I'm just like, no, you're mixing me up with somebody else. I didn't do anything like that. And that's when she screamed, you split personality. And she really, really scared me. And she was my best friend. And the fact that she's insisting I did something that I had no memory for, it kind of tapped into some anxiety that I had, that I knew that somehow I was different. I knew that somehow I just felt like I was weird in some way that I could not put my finger on. And for her to call me a split personality, I felt scared and sad that she might be correct. There was nobody I would go to ask about this. It was just going to have to be this secret, and it was just like this dreadful secret that I had, that maybe I'm doing things, horrible things that I don't know about. And it was very, very terrifying. And I just shoved that away, tried not to think about it, and went on with my life.
Wow. That's a big one.
Yeah.
So what happened about your menses?
Well, all my other girlfriends are writing down when they have their periods so that they can be prepared for the next one. And I was always prepared for everything. Like, I did my homework on time. I planned my days. I got things done. I took care of life in a very orderly way. And it would have been really natural for me to make a secret little symbol on my calendar so that I would know. And I felt that for me to make even a secret symbol on my calendar would be somehow wrong, and I wasn't supposed to do it. I just felt completely prohibited from writing it down. And so every time I would go see the doctor, which, is not that often when you're a kid, but whenever I would go, when I was a teen, they would always ask, and when was your last period? And I would say, I don't know. And I would just shrug. And it would feel like it was so long ago. So the explanation given was that I just had irregular periods. And I know I had very irregular periods. But for the length of time back to the last period, just not to even have a clue when it was, we've heard about some of these children who are being, used by aliens of different races, that a lot of them are doing breeding, and that they're using young women as breeders. And so I think that they might have mind-controlled me to never write it down so that I would never know that I was going 3 weeks or something, or 3 months between periods, which would give me time to host a baby and for them to take it at a very, very young age, which is what we hear aliens do. It's the story. I don't know if it's true, but it sure does fit in there. And
I listened
late
to
in
a
life,
story recently that
can
they
I just tell one more thing?
Okay, late in life. Go ahead.
Late in life, I had an ectopic pregnancy, and so they had to go in and they had to do emergency surgery. And when I came out, he asked me a question that I'd been asked other times. How many abortions have you had? And I said, I've had no abortions. And he just looked at me like, you liar. And he also told me that I had an unusual amount of endometriosis, and that he just didn't believe that I had never had an abortion. And since then, I noticed quite a few doctors when I'd said none, and you can just see the face. It's like, okay, she's a liar. And I've never had an abortion.
Oh my God.
So I'm thinking that when the aliens remove these children, that they must do something that somehow changes the uterus that a doctor can read decades later and say, oh, she's had a bunch of abortions. And or you've had a bunch of alien babies removed, one or the other. I don't know.
So, the third option is you have an alien baby, and they actually take you on board ship, and you go into labor, and you're birthing a tiny 2-month or 3-month-old fetus, and that's taken out and put into a artificial womb, freestanding, like a test tube, and they continue to grow it until it's viable to come be out on its own. So who was it? Somebody was saying she would have, all the time. They'd go and take her, and she'd give birth. And I said, no, didn't they just take him out, cesarean? No, we would give birth. I went, oh, my God.
I guess they could probably induce labor.
They induced labor, or maybe because they weren't human, you would go into labor or something. But she said one time we were all in an underground base, military base, and it was so painful whenever the ETs took us, and there were often many people all giving birth in the same facility, right? You could hear them. So this one was a military one, and everybody was in pain and agony, and they're screaming. But the ET ones, it was just peaceful and calm, and the energy was different. So I went, interesting. So that might explain that, it might look like I don't know what it looks like for a woman when she has an abortion. But it seems like removing the fetus before a natural ending might create, like you said, something that a doctor could. Doctors, any doctor out there, does this make sense? Write to me.
Yeah, let us know.
Brain Radio at Gmail. Let us know, because I don't know. I'm not a gynecologist. I'm not an obstetrician. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that curious?
Well, let's curious. So, and I remember time, I've never had a late period, and I've never given birth. But one time I was, there was 2 times I was just, one time I was at home, and I had such intense pain that I doubled over, and I went to the bathroom, and there was this thing in there. So I think I had a miscarriage. Another time I was walking down the streets of the main drag in Avalon Bellevue. Same thing, doubled over in pain. And I think I went to the bathroom, didn't have anything. I can't remember how that one turned out. But I was like, oh, my God, couldn't even walk. It was so painful.
Oh,
but it didn't last long.
I had a miscarriage, and I happened to be in Europe, and I was waiting for a plane, and I was in so much pain I could not stand it. Like you said, just doubled over, and I did not know what was wrong. And walking toward the plane, I almost passed out, but I held on to other people. I stayed on my feet, and suddenly all the pain's gone. So I go into the airport bathroom, and I deposited this little egg-like thing with little squigglies on the end of it, and I went, oh my goodness, I just had a miscarriage. And anyway, it's very interesting. Those happen. They say that a lot of women have miscarriages and don't even know.
So it's I don't know what it looks like inside a woman if she's had miscarriages, abortions, full births. It's a mystery. So somebody out there, let us know, educate us, and I'll probably Google it after the show to try to get some insight on that. Interesting questions. Okay, so you're not tracking it, and something is telling you not to track it, probably because you're a reader. And did you ever start recording it, or?
Oh, when I was an adult, I finally did.
Yeah. Well, see, I started keeping track. See, I did the other reaction. I want to know when things are going on. So I started keeping track because I started having sex. See, I think that I was being guided to have sex. Like, I got really horny early on and really curious. And I had committed to myself, and said, no, Janet, you're not having sex till you're 17 or 18 years old. You don't want to deal, because this is before Roe versus Wade, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to be a young, unwed mother, right? It's like, oh, God, that's too much drama. So I kept track, but then that's how I noticed there were weird, that's when around my abductions, it's like, wait, there's something happening. So, and I didn't really pay heavy attention to it, but when I was in my 30s, I was trying to get pregnant, and I've been tracking since my teens, right, since my first period. And I really noticed increased ET contact. So I was definitely part of some breeding program. They even told me,
I don't know if I was when I was older.
You don't know if you were part of it? Let's say that again.
When I was older, I don't think I was anymore, but I don't know. Hard to know, right? They keep us amnesic for as much as they can.
But I did ask him, why are you wanting me to have sex with all these people? I don't want to have sex. So I got married at 16, because it's like, I want to be having all these different. So I committed myself to being monogamous. And they answered me that when I was younger. They said, oh, because we want to have a variety of DNA. So if you have sex, we can just retrieve the semen out of your vaginal wall. I went, really? So I'm having this conversation with somebody. And it's like, okay. It's really interesting when you get answers, because it was over my head at that point. I'm a 13, 14, 15-year-old child, and I don't know much about it. Nobody talks about sex.
Yeah, but you at least got that communication that was clear, it sounds like.
Yeah. So what's this amnesia you had on the family vacation? Yeah, go ahead. They were.
Yeah. Well, let me go ahead and answer that. Yeah, we went on a vacation every Thanksgiving, every Easter, and every summer. And I always thought that our summer vacations were 2 weeks long. And I happened to mention that to my siblings, and they went, our family vacations were 4 weeks long. And that's not that significant, except that there was a famous vacation that my siblings, well, it's famous to me because my siblings were always mentioning it, and I had absolutely no memory of it. And I wondered, well, was I a teenager and maybe involved in the plays, and some summer we decided to let me stay home? I don't remember that, but I'm trying to invent reasons why I would not remember this one place that we went. And I remember being on the highway going in that direction, but I do not remember ever being there at all. And it has just bothered me so much that my siblings are always talking about the vacation in this one location, and I have no memory of it at all. And then one of the families that used to vacation with us, the woman mentioned how wonderful it was that I would direct the children, the other kids, in putting on plays for all the adults. And she mentioned the time that I directed everybody in a production of a shortened version of The Wizard of Oz. And I have no memory of that. And I told her that at the time. I said, what? Not me. And she said, oh, yes. And see, I was the oldest girl among all the families that got together. I was the oldest girl. And so she wasn't mixing me up with anybody else. And I can't think of anybody else who was just slightly younger than me who would have been doing that. There was nobody as old as me. I was the oldest. So I was either or both amnesic some of the time for those vacations, or else wholly amnesic for an entire vacation. And I even I've just got this question. Is it possible that the family went on a 4-week vacation and that I was gone for 2 weeks of that every time? And that's why I only remember 2-week long vacations? I don't know. It's just a mystery, but we had lots of vacations, and I'm kind of thinking that vacations were the way that I might have been. Well, actually, I one time, how long ago was it? Maybe 15, 12 years ago, I just suddenly, I was working at processing something, and I had this huge emotional reaction around summer vacations, and just suddenly knew that it was during those vacations that a lot of my programming was done. And so that's why I have amnesia for those vacations, and why I thought that they were 2 week long, and my siblings say no, they were 4. So anyway, that I think is just one more clue about the programming.
Well, I think you're onto something there. And why would they need you to be away from your home to do some of that? Maybe there was an opportunity to separate you.
Yeah, a better opportunity to separate us, and also no clues in our normal environment that would allow us to maybe remember something later on. If we're in an entirely foreign environment, we won't have any daily triggers that could accidentally make us remember.
And that's actually quite a long time for vacation.
Well, yeah.
4 weeks. So nobody had to go do a job?
Well, my father he's a veterinarian, and he had his own animal hospital, and he had 2 other doctors who worked with him. And so I thought we just took 2 week vacations, but the doctors would just, cover for each other. And he worked extremely long hours. He worked 70 hours every week. So for him to take a good long vacation, he deserved it. And
so
it was long. Down, but it would also be part of his job to be my handler. So it wasn't like he was taking time off. He was doing paid work, to make me accessible to the programmers and all of that.
I mean, now is your father still alive?
Yeah, he is.
Have you ever had any conversations with him?
No, we can't. We cannot have these conversations. And he has, when I was a child and I would just say, hey, why did we move from here to there? And my parents would say, why do you ask? They didn't want to ever answer any questions about my childhood. Every time I asked, I would get this answer, why do you ask? And I just felt the defensiveness all my life to the point where I just don't even ask anymore anything. Because they get hostile. They think I'm suspicious, and they think I'm going for this information that they do not want to give me. And so we have a very circumscribed relationship that is very limited.
Well, I can't remember having a ton of really deep conversations with either of my parents, and they're both gone now, so. But what I would ask them if they were alive now, it's like, it wasn't safe for the information to come out until they died, too. That was the other thing. Once they died, it was like, okay, now I can say things. I can even, remember things because it wasn't safe. Right.
And I'm being very, very limited in what I'm sharing now. I'm sharing a little bit more than I did before my mom died. And I might have more to share later on, but I'm being careful.
Well, it's over time, yeah. The more I'm in this field, the more I'm open about sharing, and it's shocking when other people are like so repressed, and it's like, well, yeah, so I probably say too much, but it's like at a point in my healing, I can't help myself. It's just been repressed for so many years, all these things that happen, so. And,
and we're so programmed.
I guess that's why people do memoirs.
Yeah. And, after a lifetime of being convinced to just shut up, sometime you're going to have to speak. We're social animals, and we want to tell our stories. And, some people, who is it? Spider Woman in some Native American story says, stories are all we have. We have to tell our stories. And when I read that, it was like, thank you. I'm ready to tell my story now.
My story. And
that's all I have.
Be witnessed. We need to, for total healing, we need to be witnessed. And ideally, just accepted, acknowledged, and, judge not that you be judged. So we're not judging, just, I hear you. So I get really upset when somebody starts, I have somebody sharing and then somebody starts judging them. It's like, I feel like a mother hen protecting. You cannot judge this person. They're being vulnerable. We're here to witness. We're not here to demand proof or, expect anything from them. Just, it's so, it's hard for some people to just come to that point where they feel safe to be vulnerable and they're here to be witnessed, and then somebody does that. Oh man, pisses me off. Anyway, let me go back to your thing because we're running out of time. So tell me about your first high school fiction about escaping from a hospital. What was going on there?
Yes. I had never really done any serious writing. I guess maybe I had in my I had written journals and I just done school reports, But suddenly I was given the assignment to write fiction about anything I wanted. I'm in high school. I think I was a sophomore, and for some crazy reason, I wrote this incredible story. I wish I had it right now, but it was the voice of a man who's in a hospital, and he's drugged, and he can't move or think very well, but he can move enough, and he has to escape. And he figures out when they're going to be, not watching, and he escapes out of this hospital, and he gets outside, and he's on a train track. And he's just kind of like stumbling in this drugged state trying to get away. And that's the first story that I ever decide to write.
Oh, my God.
And
what was going on with you?
That was very creative. And my teacher hands it back, and he looks at me like, where in the world did that come from?
Yeah, he knows enough about where it comes from.
And at that
say?
moment, I was like, what an odd question for you to ask me, I thought that it was just supposed to be this creative thing, and I just came up with a creative thing, and why are you acting so shocked? But now I think it's quite indicative that I had probably had many, many experiences of being stuck, drugged in some hospital somewhere and wanting to get away. And so that was the very first story that I ever turned into a teacher for creative writing.
Wait till you do your timeline. All this stuff's going to come. Look at these giant ahas. Oh, now that makes sense. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, we'll find, when you get that, you'll come back and we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But there were some clues there. So you got the train tracks.
Yeah.
You got the drugs. What else?
And hospital and being constrained and wanting away.
I bet if you would have just take that and write that up again.
Yeah, I probably should.
Every time I write it up, I write things up, I get more and more detail, and then I go, where did that come from? Wow.
Yeah. Well, I often want to explore these things a little bit more, but I'm always thinking, well, there's probably one that's even more important. And that was the impetus for me putting together my database. And I'm still working at cleaning up the database, and I remember more things, and I put it in. I don't know. I've got over 1,000 lines in my database, and some of them are kind of boring, like just feeling completely disabled on some day, and I don't have much more to say about it other than I'm disabled. But there's some really weird stuff in there, and
yeah, but in my
thousand
there.
points. And I'm overwhelmed. Where do I start? If I'm going to pay some hypnotherapist to, work on this, or if I'm even going to just take 2 hours of my own evening and decide to delve into this, where do I start? Which one do I pick? There is so flippin' much here, I don't even know where to start.
Well,
and
close your eyes.
Stalled a little bit in recent years.
Yeah. Close your eyes.
Because
take your notes.
Yeah.
Let your higher self take it. Close your eyes, flip through it. Have your eyes closed, flip through it, then point somewhere in the paper, and then it's like, there's where I start.
Okay. I'll tell you when I've done it.
I'm excited. I think that this is something. I think we're on to something. Some way that you can really, facilitate your own healing, get your story out there.
And you're interviewing me, and Sasha's psychologist, input and his questions. All of this stuff is making me feel like I'm becoming very very ready to start processing more material and discovering more. And I will be. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to dig things up.
Thank you. We love doing this.
More.
I love doing it. Well, you're very easy to facilitate. Some people get really defensive, and they
really?
Well, what I notice sometimes when I'm working with clients or friends or people that I agree to do a process with, is they'll hit a block. And then all of a sudden the story goes from clarity to segues and nonsense, babbling.
Oh, dear.
No, it doesn't make any sense, right? And then it's like, it's almost like you hit a button and they go, I had one yesterday.
Hit some triggering material that they might have a program at that point to start diverting and going off sideways.
Yes, and I had one of those yesterday, and it's like, and then that's where I lose my therapeutic presence and I start getting frustrated. And if I can't get it back on track, I often find myself zoning out. It's like it triggers my program, and I just zone. And then I come back and where the hell was I? Where was I? Oh my God! I was supposed to be tracking this person, and they don't know that I just left my body. I zoomed in space and came back, and so then what happens is my body will just be going right the whole time. It's like an automatic okay, right, yeah. And then I come back and go, oh my God, what did they say? I hope that I can pass the test because I don't want to be caught not paying attention, right? So.
Oh, I know what
you mean.
It's
hard.
Yeah.
Sasha's one of the best therapists I've ever met, and he could hold a lot of material. But I don't know. I think I might just start to record everything, and then just be honest. Say, you know what? I just got triggered. I don't know where I was too. Let's rewind that and see what we said.
Hey, let me tell you just one story or I could tell a couple stories about being triggered, but one of them is I picked up a movie at a thrift store. I love shopping at thrift stores, and I brought it home, and I watched it, and when it was over, I couldn't remember it. And so I just thought, well, I guess I get to watch it again then. I watched L.A. Confidential 4 times, and every single time I have known that I dissociated before it was over. There's something about 3/4 of the way through that triggers me. L.A. Confidential. Kevin Spacey was in it, and some blonde actress. But basically, it's about Hollywood in the 40s, and I know that Hollywood has been using mind control for a long time, and I know that their mind control goes back to the 40s. And so I think there's something about that world in there that triggered me because something in the 40s mind control in that movie was similar to the mind control that I experienced. And I just
so that's Kevin
dissociated
Spacey too.
What?
Kevin Spacey. He's part of that too.
I think so.
Oh my God.
And I like Kevin Spacey. But
I'm sorry he got all that stuff. Yeah.
I am too. And yeah. And even my other mind control my other mind control handlers, I still like them. I recognize them as other mind control subjects who have also been raped and tortured as children. And even though they're harming me through their handling, still have sympathy for them. I don't hate them. And so, I can feel the same way toward Kevin Spacey. It's like just another wounded soul.
Yeah. We're all wounded. Well, see, that goes to the highest level. We don't know where this comes from, but they always have something on everybody. So there's the top of this pyramid that's initiating and making this happen. So you can get there and play the blue-red game, and it's that party and that party, and they're doing this, and they've got the child trafficking, but where did it start? It could be extraterrestrial.
I think extraterrestrials at the very top. Excuse me?
Yeah. I think we're saying the same thing, that it's aliens, that they are manipulating humanity, and then people are doing things, and they're coming out and they go, what the hell did I just do? They don't even know why. It's like, so that's why you can forgive everybody, but we've got to protect each other. So what did you just say? You think it's alien, and what was your? We were both talking at the same time. Go ahead. What did you say?
Right. I was just saying aliens are the ones at the top, and people like Fritz Springmeier have made the pyramid, and they've got, I don't know who he has at the top of the pyramid. I haven't really studied it that much, but I believe the aliens are controlling them, and I don't know which aliens I'm even talking about. And
we don't know.
And I think it's very, very complicated. Just like if you ask somebody to explain Earth politics, they'd go, where do I begin? Well, it's the same thing with the extraterrestrial politics. It's a very complicated thing that probably has many thousands of years of history, and we just don't need to accept any story that anybody comes up with. It's probably going to be just a tiny fraction of the true story, the whole thing, and I don't know. I'm not that interested in trying to figure out who all the players are, actually. Maybe one day I will, but not right now. If I can just understand who's interacting with me right now in this life, I'm happy. I don't need to know the whole structure of a world and ET connections. That's huge. If somebody wants to tell me, I'm interested.
It's huge.
But I can't figure it out.
But even somebody told you, you don't know if it's the truth or it's information or disinformation. So I just read the whole conspiracy field. I said, it's all fake news. So, we can't sort it out. So, why don't we just choose what resonates with us and where we can go into a positive timeline, a positive reality? Because otherwise you sit there and do the blame, shame, victimizer game. You can do that till you're blue in the face and you'll never get anywhere. So let's just call it a day and start doing something kind with each other. Because we're mean. This is a mean planet. It's really mean. I don't know why it came here. Sometimes I used to go, this is freaking mean. Woo. Wow. Nasty.
Yeah.
Nasty. Okay, we got 2 more questions. Let's see if we get through it. What about this 4 inches of hair growing out of your face one morning? What was going on there? Growing a beard?
Weird. So I woke up some morning, and I go and I just kind of like brush my face, and there's something stuck on it. And I go in the bathroom, and I look, and I pull this thing, and my skin pulls out. And I'm thinking, and this hair is really, it's grown with a whole lot of chaos, just like all bent up and weirdly shaped. And it's kind of like fat and thin, and yet it truly is in my face. I thought, well, maybe it just stuck on with something. But no.
Wow.
I took my tweezers and I plucked it out, and it had a root hair on the bottom of it. Thing was, when I stretched it out, it was, like I said, it was all wiggly. When I stretched it out, it was 4 inches long, and it came out about, if you, on my right cheek, straight out from my mouth about 1.5 inches and up about 1 inch. That's where it came out.
Oh, my
and
God.
I was really shocked. And I thought, so what in the world would happen to me to make a hair grow overnight? And so I take it into the kitchen where my parents are usually in there, and my dad was at the breakfast table then. And I said, look what I just pulled out of my face. And he goes, oh, that was just stuck on your face. And I said, look. And I showed him the hair follicle at the bottom. And he goes, yeah, that sure looks like a hair follicle. And you remember, my dad's a doctor. So he said, yeah, sure looks like one.
Dad's a doctor.
How could it? What?
I didn't know your dad was a doctor. So go ahead.
Well,
yeah.
he's a veterinarian. He knows what a hair follicle looks like. So how in the world could that happen? And he's just like, I don't know. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it, if you hadn't told me. And he could still see where, I had a little teeny red spot where I swore that I had plucked it out.
Oh, my God.
Now that I've learned about, this whole alien thing. So what makes a hair suddenly just grow crazy like that? I just thought it was just some weird anomalous thing and I would never know. But now that I've, learned about space travel and time travel and all this stuff and radiation, those are my 3 theories. And I can't go any further than that on it. But I wouldn't be surprised. If somebody told me that I did a little space travel that night, and
you would
somehow,
be surprised.
that would explain it to me, and I'd be satisfied with that explanation. All I know is I've just had
I think you answered it. Yeah.
Just
we
weird
say in
stuff my whole life.
psychology, she who asks knows. So you can't question unless you know the answer on some level.
Yeah.
You may not know it on your ego level, but you know it on another level. Yeah. You need to somehow, you have to have enough information to postulate the question. So yeah, I think you're on to something there. So now, what is this? What do you know about Jesus? Come to Jesus. What do you know about Jesus?
Yeah.
Who is Jesus to you?
I was not brought up by religious parents. My father was an agnostic who never cared to talk about religion at all. My mother had been brought up sort of part-time in the Mormon church. She thought that they had a very proud pioneer history, and she was proud to be a Mormon, but she didn't really want to ever go to church. She liked to drink her coffee, and she liked to have wine now and then, and she just didn't want to go to church. So she was a really bad Mormon. And we were what the Mormons call Jack Mormons. I don't know why that name was applied, but we just were Mormons who almost never showed up at church. Every now and then Mom would feel like she needed to take us. So I every now and then was taken to the church. And I remember having really bad memories. Like one time we went to something called Children's Church. And when I came out, I was out of my body with rage. So, I heard Jesus' teachings. And I was out of my body with rage, and I was saying to myself, I will never go back there again. Really angry and just. So anyway, I'd heard about Jesus, and I knew what God and Jesus wanted us to do, wanted us to be good children and, obey the rules and blah, 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 be nice to each other. But I didn't ask, at some point I just blew it all off, and I didn't think about God or Jesus very much, except for when my Catholic friend would sometimes, she'd talk about church, and she was all intense about attending church. But I still didn't think much about it at all. And I did have one more experience in the Mormon church when I was 13, I believe. My mom suddenly got this idea that I really needed to go to this late afternoon Mormon young girl program, and she would take me there every week, and I hated it. But she just insisted I had to go because they were only using a couple rooms. They left all the lights off and just had lights in just the few rooms that we were in, but we looked down these dark hallways. It was spooky as could be. And so so we're learning things like knitting and embroidery. I already knew how to do all those things. So we're doing these stupid craft projects and making bandalos, like Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts had. Well, there's a Mormon version of that. And I had the sorriest bandalo because I didn't do anything,
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that was the thing I was going to. And toward the end of this period, one of the teachers taught us about Satan. And she starts telling us scary stories about Satan and how when she was going to Brigham Young University, Satan appeared in the moonlight coming through the window, and some boy was picked up and thrown against the wall, and Satan is really real and you ought to be scared.
Oh,
so,
God.
That very night when my mom picked me up, she said, "So what was your lesson about?" And I said, "It was about Satan, and it was really scary." And she says, "Do you want to keep going?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Okay." And I was like, "Is that easy? I don't have to go ever again?" Well, that was the end. I never went back in another Mormon church after that. And I was really glad that she freed me. So that was about as much, introduction to religion as I had. And when I was in college, I decided I wanted to study all the world's religions. Because I just knew there was some spiritual truth out there, and I wanted to find out who had it. And so right after I made this commitment to myself, I was invited to go to a Christian youth presentation, and it was in the basement of this church. And so I thought, well, I guess I'll start with Christianity. I don't know that much about it. So I'm down in the basement listening to this youth minister, and he's talking about Jesus, and he talks about he tells 5 parables that are probably familiar to all the listeners. There was a Mary and Martha story in which he was encouraging Mary that she didn't have to go wash dishes. If she wants to sit down and listen to teaching, that's totally fine. So, that was non-sexist. And non-materialist, of course, is give away your cloak, and non-racist is take care of the Good Samaritan. So anyway, Jesus is non-materialist, non-racist, non-sexist, non-violent, and non-doctrinaire. And as soon as I heard all 5 of those things, I'm like, hey, I'm right there. I'm right there. But something else happened to me as I was coming to this rational decision. Something in my body, just with this huge whoosh of memory, I felt that I've known Jesus for thousands of years. And this was completely shocking to me. I never, ever perceived myself as having a life that could have extended back in time for thousands of years. That had never occurred to me. But suddenly, in an instant, I knew it. And I remembered my relationship with Christ, and that, oh yeah, of course, Christ teaches this, and I'm just like right there, and I always have been right there. So that was really shocking, and that's when I became a little Jesus hippie when I was 19 years old, just really happy and happy that there was an example of hippies. I was really wanting to be a hippie badly, and I had never had an opportunity, having grown up in Paradise Valley, Arizona, in a very conservative town that was just like not on the radar anywhere. And so that was my urge, and now I'm finding out that all these hippie ideals were embodied in Christ, and I suddenly remember that I know him, and I've always known him, was a profound thing. And so I, Christian, and spent years trying to find a home in the Christian church where I felt comfortable, and that never happened. It never happened. Well, one time it did. Quite a few years later, I found a bunch of Christians who were like into the environment. They were working for peace. They were anti-nuclear. They were welcoming gays and lesbians, to be in their church and to be out. And I loved those people so much, but we didn't stay in that town very long, and it was a great loss to me when we left there. But anyway, eventually I just got burned out on the church, and when I had a small group of Christians turn on me because I wanted to divorce my abusive husband. They all joined with him, decided I was not a Christian if I believed in divorce, and that I should just stay with him no matter what. And then my husband told me, and I don't know if this is true, he told me that they were all going to gang up against me and go to court and make sure that he got custody, and that they were going to call me crazy. And I never heard that from any of them. He told me, and so I think he was lying, but I believed him at the time. And so I ended up just denouncing Christianity. I completely forgot my personal relationship with Christ. Completely forgot it. Just put it out of my head. I hated Christians so much because they were going to help my husband take my kids away from me. So I became an angry atheist for a long time, and then I became an agnostic. And it took me a long time to come back and say, Jean, you had this experience with Christ. Anyway, I became eventually a pantheist, and I guess I would still call myself a pantheist today, who among the pantheon is Christ. And anyway, he has definitely colored my spiritual quest ever since I decided I was back on a spiritual quest again after 3 decades off. And so now I'm kind of a shamanist who also has Christ as one of my spiritual helpers. And I went
had
to
a spontaneous memory
conference.
too.
Yeah,
I went to a shamanic conference. Yeah, you said you had the ancient history with Jesus, so I remembered like a past life, right? So it was kind of like a past life. Is that what you're saying? That it was you walked with him in a past life
there. Yeah. And then when I was in my hermitage one time, I was out walking in the desert, and when I came back in, I spontaneously grabbed my Bible off the shelf. This is a Bible that had been given me by my first husband. I still had it, just kind of as a reference book, and I hadn't looked at it in decades. And I just suddenly grabbed it, and I sat down, and I just opened it up and read, and pretty soon I was sobbing and crying, remembering being back there during that time. And so I'm assuming it felt as if I was among his inner circle somehow. And that I had
that was the memory I had too.
I had expected to see him, and the scripture that I had read was about sometime the crowd was too big, so the apostles had put Jesus in a boat, and they're going to row him across the lake just to get away from the crowd. And the crowd was starting to disperse right when I had arrived. I had imagined myself arriving and seeing them taken off across the lake. And I was really sad that I had just missed my connection. I had fully expected to, be hanging out with a small group of people that evening. So I think I do have a connection back there.
Well, I had a dream one night, and it was so profound that I was out of my body for like 2 weeks afterwards. But I won't tell the whole story, but basically I was a young girl, and my parents didn't want me to go see him. He was coming to town, and so they locked me up in my room because I had been out and I was part of the crowd one night, and I was going to go to the thing the next day, and I was so excited, and I told them, and they just locked me in my room. So I somehow broke out in the middle of the night, and I crept out on, I guess it was on a rooftop or something, and I jumped on another one, and it was like a tight community village type thing where the roofs connected, and so I left, and I never saw them again. And so I started to follow the group, and we were going from town to town, and I had the job of giving away stuff. So every time we would go into a new town, people would just come and just give us everything, all kinds of things, from jewels to food, whatever. And we didn't believe in keeping any of it. So when we were moving on, I was on this big series of carts, and we just start throwing stuff out to the audience here, as we're leaving. Here. And so that was my job. Anyway, it went on, and it was pretty detailed. And then I went to a meditation group sometime after that, and I met this guy, and he's saying, I was part of the group, and as he was telling his story, I remembered, yes, you were part of the group. And so when he was done, I said, when you're talking, and I could see you, I said, you look somewhat like what you look like bad, little differences, but basic same, movements and mannerisms. And he was Jewish in this lifetime, whatever that means. But, yeah, so anyway, but I never forgot, because it was like I was in a different vibratory frequency, because I'd been in this past life the whole night. Hey, this is the end of the show. Final words. And we can do this some more sometime. This is fun. What would you like our listeners to know before? Yeah.
Yeah, well, this mind control feels so totally destructive, and yet there are other parts of us that I think get enhanced, like our spiritual connection and our spiritual ability to remember past lives and all that. I think it's probably part of the mind control and what it has developed in our brains. And I don't know if that was their intention to do it or whether it's a side effect, but I'm starting to balance out the terror and fear that I've had around it with appreciation for other things that have come with it, which I find I'm really interested and kind of fascinated to see myself coming to this more balanced conclusion, but it's kind of a relief after spending so many years being terrified.
I love that you say that, because that's what I'm finding too, that somehow, I don't know, it's like you come out the other side. You you're more conscious, more spiritual. I had this young man who was like telling his horrible stories about how he's abducted and working on other planets, and he's killing people and being killed, and it's like the next time I talked to him, like 2 years later, he's like so conscious and calm. He's like a Buddha, and I went, oh, wow. I go, what happened? He says, well, I'm finally integrating all this.
Yeah, there's hope for us, and I hope people can take some hope from that.
With that, we're at the end of the road here, so thank you so much, Ann Eisenhower. We'll have you back again. The recording will be available in a couple hours, and I'll send you the link. And thank you so much, listeners, for joining us today. And much love and blessings and aloha, and we'll see you again next Friday. Aloha. Love and blessings. Bye.
Bye.